Welcome, everyone, to our brand new podcast called Getting Deep with a PhD and a JD.
So, of course, I have a question for you.
Of course, got to start the new year off right.
Exactly. So, here's my question. What historical figure was coerced into displaying her almost nude body for money?
You've got to be talking about Saartjie Baartman, also known as Sarah Baartman.
Absolutely. And also known as Hottentot Venus.
Yes, Hottentot Venus. And we're going to get into what all of that means and what her harrowing experience, how it represents our culture of Black women's sexuality then, and how it has impacted that now, and the attributes of sexuality that's very specific to us as Black women, and how her experience really exhibited it and impacted it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think it's important for us to start and just let folks know just a little bit about Saartjie, or Sarah, as she is also known. She was born in 1789 in South Africa, and they mentioned that she was born on the Cape. And she, of course, we're not talking about a wealthy woman. We're talking about a family that really struggled. And it sounds like she had a lot of tragedies that happened to her at a very young age.
As a result of colonialism.
Absolutely. Losing her mother, losing her father. And then, being in a situation where it really did make her vulnerable because she was trying to figure out how to live and how to survive.
So she, was her notoriety comes from her body, essentially, right. And how different her body, and in particular her butt, how different it was to English and in other white communities. Her body structure was very different from white women, essentially.
Yeah.
And she was put on display in European countries, namely London and Paris.
Mm-hmm.
And Ireland was also mentioned.
Right.
And her specific, like I said, body part, which is her butt, was the highlight. And, one of the things that we learned in our research is that there was a fascination with the gluteus maximus.
Absolutely.
During that time.
Yeah, yes.
They called it the Georgian era. And we see it on through the clothing that white women wore to accentuate or add to it to make it look like it. So we're talking about are the dresses that poofed out,
that had the bustles,
the bustles
in the back,
in the back.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so that was seen as sexual and desirable.
And they were fascinated with the fact that Saartjie had this attribute naturally.
Yes.
So I just want to get that out. Yes. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important for us to say, well, how did she get from South Africa to then get to Paris, and then get to London, and then get to Ireland and have this happen? And so in our research, there was a man who found her, and actually I believe that she was hired by him and then by his brother to do some domestic work. And the man that found her, I believe his last name was Cesar. Cesar, yes. He actually worked in a hospital, and there was a doctor with the last name Dunlop who he talked to this doctor, because what he would do is he would show her to and talk about her to the different people in the hospital. And so this doctor became very fascinated.
Mm-hmm.
And they came up with this plan that they could, if they're so fascinated, then other people in other places would be very fascinated by this woman's body and being able to see her and interact with her. And
Mm-hmm.
so they actually came up with a contract. And the contract stated, or this is what they told her that it stated, because she could not read, she did not
Mm-hmm.
know what the contract really said, was that she would be able to go to London, to Paris, to these different places, and she could work as a servant, as a domestic worker, and earn money. And then they threw in, but you'd be under, you'd have an exhibit, you'd be exhibited.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you'd still make money. And so they
Mm-hmm.
said in the contract that she would get half of the money.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the surprising things that we found was that so they were the Cesars, they were brothers. The one brother introduced her to the other
The other
brother,
brother.
which is the brother that she had the contract with, that they were Black.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know that. You didn't know that. And I'm pretty sure a lot of our listeners probably didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Different articles describe them as either mixed race or just Black.
Yeah.
And that was very surprising to me. Of course, other handlers that came into her life were white,
We're
but
white. Yes.
these two were in fact Black, and they were the ones that exhibited her
Mm-hmm.
in London mainly,
Right.
and then probably some other countries too.
But
But
you know what?
I
But you
mean
know what,
cities.
Kimmy?
Hmm.
As I'm thinking about it, I think that it probably makes more sense now, because think about it. She would have had to have been, someone would have had to approach her and talk about the possibility of working outside of her home, like
Uh-huh.
actually moving.
Hmm.
And also, they would have had to talk to her and gain her confidence and her trust. And one
Hmm.
of the things that I saw was
That's
that,
interesting.
yeah, because, and so having a Black man approach her, um, she may have seemed less threatened or less concerned about him, uh, just because he
No
probably,
ulterior motives. Yeah, she
exactly,
didn't think that there would be
exactly.
ulterior motives. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so I did see in my reading that as she was trying to as they were trying to convince her to do this, she said, well, can Cesar, and the first brother that she met, she said, well, can he come with
Hmm.
us? And
Hmm.
I believe he did not go. Although
I don't
it was a
recall
little
in
bit
my research. Yeah.
confusing. Yeah.
Hmm.
But
Um,
just her saying that she wanted him to come probably says something about the trust that she had for him, and why. Because our question was, well, why would a Black man approach a Black woman and ask her to put her body on exhibit and
yeah.
exhibition, and allow herself to be degraded and treated like this?
Right.
And so there had to be some trust somewhere.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and the promise of a future or
Hmm.
a lifestyle different than what than what she was used to in
Right. Right.
her town, her hometown.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so a lot of people, know her, like you said, by her moniker, which is Hottentot Venus. And it's, her name represents multiple, it's a multiple layer analysis
It's
of.
very layered. Let's just put it
Mhm.
out there.
Yeah, exactly. And Hottentot comes from the Dutch, and the Dutch, in their description of the way that her community spoke the language, and with the cliques, we know a lot of African countries, and the tribes and the communities. Some of those languages include clicking
Yeah,
as a
different
part of
different types of vocalizations.
it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I know the clicking. Yeah.
And they just, and so the Dutch just gave them that name. Like, so Hottentot isn't really just, associated with her.
Right.
it's
Right.
associated with her
Her
entire
group. That
her
group.
group, her
Yeah.
community, tribe. I don't know what the
And
correct
it's
term would be.
considered derogatory too.
Mm-hmm.
Although the current um, descendants have pretty much taken that name and they're reclaiming it and making it less offensive. They're saying,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, we're taking this term and we're." So I did read some articles about that. So, but it
Interesting.
originally the term was a derogatory term.
Well, yeah, it was derogatory, and it became more derogatory, right? Because initially it was just associated with, yes, describing this group, right? And of course, since the beginning of time, the goal is to degrade and conquer um, African people. So it was definitely associated, and then it just, but it became more than just associating it with identifying her particular group of people, but it also then became straight up just associated with negativity. I'm looking for a quote from this book, where, and I think it was Sarah herself who described it as being associated with negativity. And of course, where is it? I
Well,
can't
it's because
find
there's
it.
so much information, that
It
we
is a
had to
lot of
go through. Yeah,
information.
yeah.
But yeah, it was just started to begin, it was just associated with savagery,
Mm,
ugliness, deviancy. It was all, that term Hottentot became associated with that. Like that's the
yeah,
description. And so we talk about, her experience, and she would go to these shows, and and people would poke and prod. They would be allowed to touch her,
right.
and as you were, saying, you saw some of the research in how far they took that.
Yes. And I also want to say that you, in order to poke her, you had to pay extra money to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this fetishization, but it's also commercialized
Mm-hmm.
because you could be the regular viewer and just view, or
Mm-hmm.
you could pay additional money and poke and touch. And
Mm-hmm.
there were researchers that talked about what this touching meant.
Mm-hmm.
And some said that, it was really abusive and really sexually abusive.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
yeah,
and so it was and so I want to interject something here, because in some of my research, um, you know, I can't remember who it was, but some people were offended by her experience, and
yes,
an
yes.
actual legal action was taken against
It was an
Cesar.
abolitionist
Mhm.
society. And
Okay.
I believe it was called it was an African abolitionist
Oh
society
yeah, I think
got
so.
involved. And
Yes.
because
Hmm.
they said that
She was being abused
that she was being abused and that she was
against her will.
enslaved
Yeah, yeah, and that she
because the
was doing that
places,
against her
right,
will.
right.
Hmm. And what was interesting is, this lawsuit occurred. So a suit was filed against Cesar and Dunlop.
Dunlop.
Hmm. Dunlop. So Dunlop was he married to her? Was that her
I
husband?
couldn't get I didn't get clarity on that. I know that she did have children, but I could
Yeah.
but both of them died, but I couldn't get
Hmm.
clarity on the husband.
I think Dunlop was one. The person that she had her first, at least her first child with, is somebody different, I believe.
Right.
Dunlop, I think, was maybe her second
You
husband.
know that you may be onto something
Yeah.
because I did see a baptismal certificate
Hmm.
because after she moved and I believe it was to Paris or it may be London, but she actually was baptized and then she was married.
Hmm. So
Um
it's Dunlop. I think it's Dunlop.
yeah,
So they were both involved in this lawsuit, and they were the charges. I don't know specifically the legal process and how it occurred then, whether the charges were dropped or the case was dismissed. Now, whatever term was used, she was able to continue on, or they were able to
right.
continue on exhibiting her. They won the suit because she also testified
She
that she
did.
was not under duress, that she was not being abused. But of course, she was probably intimidated.
Right.
You
And they
know,
also
this was
used the
1800s.
contract. And they
And
also
oh yeah,
used the
the contract.
contract. Yeah.
Yeah, they showed that she had signed this contract, which she couldn't read,
Yeah.
and they weren't complying with, because I'd be very surprised if she actually got money and got paid for the experiences she went through. So I just wanted to interject that that you know that did occur as well during during her time.
Right. And so the question was, when she had the suit, the question was, okay, well, is this an enslaved woman who is being paraded around these different places? And so they found the whatever legal process they went through, they were not able to substantiate that. But I
Hmm.
think it is really telling after we found out that she was then sold to another person,
Hmm.
and eventually got to this person who was actually an animal trainer.
Yeah, and then her experience became much more degrading,
Yes.
animalistic. His name was Roe, Reaux. That was his last name. And so you know, so her experience in Paris was with him.
Right.
And it became much more degrading. Um, what I also
Yeah.
found surprising was they weren't only um, obsessed with her behind, they were also obsessed with her labia.
Yes.
I did not know that that was a part of it, and apparently she, you know, from her tribe, there was a process where her labia was actually manipulated so that it could hang
It's
down.
stretched. They did
Hmm.
stretching. Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
put, I think they called them pebbles. Did they call them pebbles or,
Something to add weight.
yeah, to add
Yeah.
the weight.
Yeah.
I think they were pebbles. I think that was the
Yeah.
term that was used. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
that part, and apparently it made her more valuable in her culture, the fact that her labia was stretched. So not only were they, obsessed with her behind, they were also obsessed with her labia, and that was on display as well.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of get to the impact though, because
Right.
I'm keeping, I'm the timekeeper, mother time.
those of you those of you out there who know us personally, you know why Kimmy is the timer and I am not.
So I think while I was researching this, some of the things that are occurring now was just very interesting to me, in the sense that the first thing is, um, uh, let me sort of set the context though. So, we have this impact on Black female sexuality. That's kind of where we are coming from on this topic. And I wanted to read this quote from a book that an article that I had been reading about the impact of Hottentot Venus on Black sexuality, and
Mhm.
so what this article says is that there were two prevalent images of the Black woman. On the one hand, female Black bodies were strong, productive, and reproductive bodies, so they were able bodies in the labor market. But on the other hand, they were dark skinned, grotesque, and anatomically excessive bodies that represented deviancy. By the fat female body elicited feelings of desire and disgust, producing the two existing tropes of Black female sexuality: the
Mhm.
Black Venus and then the savage Hottentot.
Yeah.
That's a mouthful. Like
That is a mouthful.
that.
That is a mouthful. Yeah.
Mhm.
And you have to just think about, when you think about the impact and what we're seeing now. And we also have to remember that we're talking about, like, now we're talking about America,
Mhm.
and this occurred in not in America. This occurred in South Africa,
Mhm.
and then this occurred in
Europe.
Europe,
Mhm.
Paris, London, and also in Ireland.
Mhm.
So how did that those pieces and those events really impact people who were across the pond, or I guess they should say.
Yeah,
And it did,
but it
it
has
did. Yeah, and it absolutely has. And it's about how people fetishized Black women's bodies
because they were different.
because they
Hmm.
were different, and
Hmm.
how, you know, when you have a person that is a part of a display and you're allowed to prod, you're not getting permission, you're just paying your money. And I believe it was 2 shillings was a
Hmm.
base rate.
Hmm.
But then you could go into, they had private parties where wealthy
Hmm.
people would actually hire her to come, and it really wasn't hiring her; it was hiring her handlers
Handlers. Uh-huh.
to bring her, so that they could inspect her in a more intimate and more private manner.
Hmm.
And it just shows
Or
the
intrusive.
history, in an intrusive manner. It just shows the history of fascination, fetishization, and also
Degradation. Hmm.
degradation. Yeah,
Hmm.
because that she was seen as other and
Hmm.
also as a thing.
Hmm.
She was not
But also
identified,
desired, because that was the
desired.
fear. The fear of white women, that the men would be drawn to um, her body, the feelings of desire that were associated with her body. But because she was Black, you have to still associate it with being grotesque at the same time,
And
right? And
savage.
then and savage, and
Yeah,
then but then on the same token, emulate her body, right?
right.
And how do we describe that in today's time? Appropriation. That
Yeah,
appropriation is going on today, and it's still being weaponized the same way it is today, in the sense of um, you know getting the lip injections,
the
getting
the
BBLs,
BBL. Yeah, yeah.
and
Even
by
labia
others.
stretching.
Hmm?
Do you know
No,
that
no,
with
I know
body
about that.
modification? Yes, they
I didn't
have.
know.
You know how you can get your
Oh, yeah,
ears
yeah, yeah.
stretched? Yes, there
Hmm.
are people who are getting their labia stretched because they consider that very, very sensual and sexual and highly
Hmm.
desired.
Hmm.
Um, and so there are lots of body modifications that people are doing to have certain traits.
Hmm.
But it's interesting because as a person who has dark skin,
Hmm.
I am treated a certain way, but their desire, in terms of things like tanning, like folks
Hmm.
getting
Right.
tanned,
To
uh,
look like you.
yes, but treated very differently,
Yes. Uh-huh.
with the lip implants that people are
Hmm.
getting. And even I was looking at lipsticks. They have lipsticks that have ingredients that will make
Make your
your
lips tingle.
irritate your lips a little bit so that they pop up a little bit more.
I use those.
Yeah. And and that's the thing.
Hmm.
That's the thing. Like there are
Yeah.
different people that are doing these things, and instead of saying that Black women are beautiful,
Hmm.
people are still making derogatory comments
It's
about
still
who.
important to. It's still important to the idea of white supremacy. It's still important,
Right.
to white supremacy to degrade, people of African descent, Black people in America. It's still important to degrade them, while at the same time coveting
Yeah.
the very aspects that make us different, right? So yeah, so that's what's still going on today. Let's move into our next segment here. What's the call to
The
action
call to
for something
action.
like this?
I think the important thing is that folks need to really understand history. And so the
Mhm.
call to action is to really start looking at the historical nature of these events that have
Mhm.
occurred. Start, because if we do not understand the history, what is the
Mhm.
quote? We are doomed to repeat it.
Mhm.
And so lots of folks, I mean, the action is become educated.
Mhm.
Start reading. When we started thinking about this topic, there are some firsthand accounts that are out there that people can read. There are newspaper articles. And so a lot of the things that I read were based on these specific historical accounts. And so people said specific things or did specific
Mm-hmm.
things, and getting these firsthand accounts, I think, is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And then because when you start to understand that people felt it was okay to display a human being,
Mm-hmm.
um, I mean, in a way that I wouldn't even say, let's display circus animals, because I still think I wouldn't
Yeah.
even say that.
Yeah.
But when you understand these things, then you can understand why the United States is the way that it is, and how, like, understanding slavery a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
and how,
Mm-hmm.
and the beliefs about women and about women's bodies and about Black women's bodies in
Black in
particular.
particular, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, I think education is key
Yes.
to learn about these circumstances and how they have carried into our current day-to-day life, so that we can remember, what the term savage was associated with and
Yeah.
why it was associated the way that it was and what it means,
Right.
so that we can make conscious decisions on how we move forward, language that we use, behaviors that we engage in. We know what that comes from and what that context means.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
so what's the good? This is this our favorite segment? Have we?
This is the Tell Me Something Good segment. I think this is our favorite segment. This is the segment where
we get to sing a little bit.
Yeah, we get to sing a little bit. Are we going to sing today? I know your throat's been bothering you, and my throat has actually started to bother me a little bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I had you folks, for those listening, I had a little bit of laryngitis right after Christmas, so my voice is getting back. And one of the biggest things that I was so disappointed is that I couldn't sing when I had laryngitis. I didn't realize how much I loved to sing just throughout the day, just doing normal tasks or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I can't sing. So we're not singing today then.
All right, so we have to sing. So my voice is kind of getting a little bit weird, but I will hold on.
Mine is recovering. So, okay.
Okay,
so,
ready? So we got to count it down.
Yeah. So
okay.
Count from 3. 3, 2, 1. Tell me something good.
That's my favorite part, the little horn.
Yeah, that is your favorite part. Oh my gosh.
Okay, so yeah. I have to say, the first thing that I think is really great is that Saartji's body was returned to South Africa. And
yes,
as we mentioned,
we forgot to say that.
Go ahead, even when she died, her body parts were put on display. They were studied. They were
in a museum. Her body parts were in a museum.
Exactly.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And they also autopsied her. But in the article that I read, they were very clear to say the autopsy wasn't about finding out how she died, because she died and there's some questions about, they said that it was some type of respiratory illness,
it was pneumonia or something like that.
Or something like that. But the autopsy was not about, let's find out what she died of, which is, the main focus of autopsies.
Yeah.
But it was about, let's see how we can study her, because she is this different, savage woman, and we want to use her body to contribute to our beliefs about her culture being inferior. And so they cut apart her body, and they took like her different genitalia to different parts, and displayed them in a museum
in Paris.
And so in Paris. So this wasn't about her
until 1974, guys. Until 1974.
Exactly. So the good news is that Nelson Mandela was instrumental and really spearheaded getting her body returned to South Africa so that it could return and it could be buried in an appropriate way, because it was just
and that wasn't until 2002.
That wasn't until 2002. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
so
mean,
that is good.
It's a good thing, and it's also a good thing that people are hearing about this,
Hmm. Yeah.
because people, I mean, these are things that when I was growing up, I vaguely heard about this, but
Hmm. Hmm.
now that her body has been returned, and
Hmm.
there are researchers that are actually focusing in on her as the research subject so that they can really explore her history and really provide um, some good information about what happened to her during her life.
Yeah.
So
And she was only 26 when she died.
she was only 26.
Um,
Only 26.
and then my tell me something good is I feel like, like the quote that I mentioned a little bit ago, there's this dichotomy of the Black woman being this being fetishized, and then at the same time degraded because of it, at the same time. And so I feel like Black women have a very confused, contradictory relationship with, we have a confused and contradictory relationship with our sexuality. I know in your and my generation, and definitely generations before us, it was very important for us to be very chaste. And I think it comes from this idea of, the majority objectifying our bodies, with Sarchi being, the representation of it. I'm pretty sure it happened with lots of others that we
Mm-hmm.
just don't know about. So she becomes the representation of that. So we battle with that. So a lot of us are taught by our mothers, who were taught by their mothers, who were taught by their mothers, that as a result of that, we need to be very chaste, and we need to be very virginal. We need to be very sexually constrained, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of that stereotype associated with our skin color and our bodies.
Right.
So I've seen a lot of younger Black women taking more control of their sexuality, losing getting away from the shame of
Right.
sexuality.
Right.
There are lots of podcasts. I was very surprised in recent years the number of podcasts, and there were young Black women talking freely about their sexuality and
Yeah,
not being ashamed.
absolutely.
You
I think
know,
that's great.
if that
Yeah.
happened when we were coming up, they would be the biggest hoes, the biggest this, the biggest that, in our communities. But that's not the case. Sexuality is a human trait. It's a human behavior, and it should be treated as such. um,
Absolutely.
and it shouldn't be treated any differently based on the color of your skin, or how your body is shaped, or any other extraneous factor you want to throw in there. So to me, that's definitely a good thing. It's taking control, and so we continue on this path of taking control of our lives just in general, and
Yeah.
sexuality is one of the ways.
I think that sounds wonderful. I think you're absolutely right, Kimmy. I think that uh, the younger generation has they have some different ways of viewing sexuality,
Yeah.
and they're able to understand that this is really normal, really natural, and they're really just really able to stand up and say, this is who I am sexually. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's so awesome. And I think that the challenge, and I'm hoping that many women in our generation, uh,
Mm-hmm.
will accept the challenge of really exploring their sexuality and
Mm-hmm.
really claiming it
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
saying, this is who I am. You don't have to say it publicly if you don't want to. You
Right.
could, and but it's just knowing who you are and living authentically, I think, is really, really important.
Absolutely. So I think
Yeah.
that's a wrap for a good first 2024's first
2024.
episode of Getting Deep with a PhD and JD. I think this is a good intro into the year, and I'm looking forward to some of the things we talk about moving forward.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to some exciting topics for this year. As always, if you all have show topics, please make sure you let us know, write them in the comments. And speaking of that, like and subscribe, because
Yes.
we definitely want to increase our viewership. We really are enjoying doing what we're doing, and we really want people to really check us out. And so, yeah, so if you have folks that you think would be interested, please pass along our link to them. Like and subscribe.
All right. Well, Nikki, it's been good. And
Yeah.
Until our next episode, everyone take care.
Bye.
Bye.